So I got a question for you guys today as we jump into this next part of this video series. But I need something from you. Honest answers only. So when I say the phrase or the term climate change, how does that make you feel? Scared? Optimistic? Indifferent? This is what we're diving into today. So let's pull this curtain back. So however you guys answered that question, I hope it was honest, and I hope that by the end of this video, perhaps maybe some of you might change your mind and look at it differently. Hopefully, if anything, we'll at least not be scared anymore. Now, this term climate change or global warming, it's carried many different faces and many different arguments. But the core of it is the same. We're destroying the planet. The planet's going to end in this many years. We have to do all this stuff. We have to implement legislation, pass laws to do our part in saving the environment. What if I told you that the science did not back up their argument? Then you would probably ask me, well, then why are they saying it? Well, remember last week's video about the mainstream media and the lies that they kind of push? Now, sure, granted, they cut out God and edit out God, but that's not all they do. They push a narrative. So why not push a narrative of like climate change and tell us something that's actually not true to keep us fearful? Because when we're afraid, they can control us. We don't think for ourselves. We don't do our own research. We don't study. We just follow what they say and believe it and take it at face value. And they can pass laws because they can get us to vote for stuff based solely out of fear. So there is this doctor, Dr. Matthew, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name because I don't know how to say it, but I will include the full clip of his segment up in the corner. He sat down with PragerU for this segment that they do about Stories of Us, and he was talking about this and how the science doesn't really back up what they're saying. So I want to play for you a clip from this segment, and then we'll peel this back a little bit. So check this out.
Sciences, if you speak about climate change, that is one of these taboo subjects. And climate change is tricky. There's a disconnect between what the science says and what the narrative in the mainstream media is, and what certain, what I would call activist scientists have been kind of pushing. The narrative in the media is doing so much damage to mental health. Climate anxiety is probably the #1 anxiety issue for the college students that I talk to. And the science does not support that fear. I think that that fear is irrational. Climate is a very convenient way for governments and institutions to get involved in nearly every aspect of a citizen's life. And if you are basing your life decisions, like whether or not to have children, whether or not to raise a family, whether or not to make sacrifices today such that maybe in a decade or not, you're going to be in a better position. If you think that the planet is going to end, you don't make those sacrifices. I definitely love the Earth, and humans have an influence on the climate and on their environment, and we should minimize that. But the disconnect that our small policy changes today will have some dramatic impact on future temperatures or weather in general is untrue. But if you speak out against it, you're essentially a pariah in this community. I gave a 2-day lecture in my introductory geology class about kind of climate realism is what I called it. The students were amazingly refreshed to hear that the planet wasn't going to end in 10 or 12 years. But faculty members were a little uncomfortable with it. If you push out scientists that disagree with your narrative, this isn't an open discussion. This isn't about finding the truth. This is about silencing those that disagree with you such that you can continue to push the narrative that you're pushing. I started to publish a little bit more on social media, and the moment that those stories gained any traction, faculty members in the University of Alabama were making posts that I was committing violence, that I was putting their jobs and their safety in jeopardy because I was asking questions. So I decided to leave during COVID. It just wasn't that dream job that I had been thinking about my entire life. It wasn't this beautiful place of the exchange of ideas that I wanted it to be. I don't think I would have been able to stay if I chose to stay. I doubt that I would have been awarded tenure if I chose to stay because I had been so vocal. The data is very clear. There is no metric that we can call the current state of the climate a crisis or an emergency or a breakdown. They're trying to elicit fear. When people are afraid, they are most vulnerable to changing their behaviors.
I just want to clarify something real quick. From that clip, when he was saying that the science does not really support what they're saying or they're pushing, he's talking about politicians, environmentalists, the way that they try to keep us as the American people scared that we're damaging the environment so much that the world's going to end really, really soon. So we don't really make long-term decisions for anything. We don't have kids because we're like, what's the point? All of this stuff. The climate does change, and we do have an effect on it, us as human beings. And we can take steps to make sure that we're not polluting the environment and just really like destroying it, but we don't have to live in fear. We can continue to have kids and have families, and we can continue to plan like long term. It's not something that we have to live in constant fear that the world's going to end because of decisions that we make. That's where this whole push for the electric cars come from, to protect the environment. That, I would highly encourage you to do the research just in how they make the batteries alone. That's just ridiculous that they push and push and push the narrative so that they can try to get us all into electric cars, because internal combustion engines are so bad and they pollute the environment so much. This is the kind of extreme one way that they try to tell us so that they can make us make decisions, try to pass laws that dealerships will not sell internal combustion engines after this certain year. It's ridiculous. So this physicist actually sat down or did a video with PragerU, and he kind of talked about what the scientists say versus what the politicians and the other people say. And I think this is really beneficial for us to really kind of paint a complete picture. So check this out.
I'm an atmospheric physicist. I've published more than 200 scientific papers. For 30 years, I taught at MIT, during which time the climate has changed remarkably little. But the cry of global warming has grown ever more shrill. In fact, it seems that the less the climate changes, the louder the voices of the climate alarmists get. So let's clear the air and create a more accurate picture of where we really stand on the issue of global warming, or, as it is now called, climate change. There are basically three groups of people dealing with this issue. Groups 1 and 2 are scientists. Group 3 consists mostly at its core of politicians, environmentalists, and media. Group 1 is associated with the scientific part of the United Nations International Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC Working Group 1. These are scientists who mostly believe that recent climate change is primarily due to man's burning of fossil fuels, oil, coal, and natural gas. This releases CO2, carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere, and they believe this might eventually dangerously heat the planet. Group 2 is made up of scientists who don't see this as an especially serious problem. This is the group I belong to. We're usually referred to as skeptics. We note that there are many reasons why the climate changes: the sun, clouds, oceans, the orbital variations of the Earth, as well as a myriad of other inputs. None of these is fully understood, and there is no evidence that CO2 emissions are the dominant factor. But actually, there is much agreement between both groups of scientists. The following are such points of agreement. 1. The climate is always changing. 2. CO2 is a greenhouse gas without which life on Earth is not possible, but adding it to the atmosphere should lead to some warming. 3. Atmospheric levels of CO2 have been increasing since the end of the Little Ice Age in the 19th century. 4. Over this period, past 2 centuries, the global mean temperature has increased slightly and erratically by about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius. But only since the 1960s have man's greenhouse emissions been sufficient to play a role. 5. Given the complexity of climate, no confident prediction about future global mean temperature or its impact can be made. The IPCC acknowledged in its own 2007 report that, quote, the long-term prediction of future climate states is not possible, end quote. Most importantly, the scenario that the burning of fossil fuels leads to catastrophe isn't part of what either group asserts. So why are so many people worried, indeed panic-stricken, about this issue? Here's where Group 3 comes in: the politicians, environmentalists, and media. Global warming alarmism provides them, more than any other issue, with the things they most want. For politicians, it's money and power. For environmentalists, it's money for their organizations and confirmation of their near religious devotion to the idea that man is a destructive force acting upon nature. And for the media, it's ideology, money, and headlines. Doomsday scenarios sell.
So now, with both of those clips and this picture hopefully fully painted, it only leaves really one question. What do we do? What do we do? And the answer is actually quite simple. We live life. We don't live life in fear. We don't live life worried that the planet's going to end in like 12 years because of everything that we're doing, so we decide to not have kids or to not plan long term. No. Have kids, plan long term, but be flexible. Now, do we affect the environment? Yes. Can we take steps to make sure that we're not polluting the environment? Also yes. But do we have to be scared about what we do and how we live and adjust our entire lives because the planet might end? No. No, we don't. We trust God. We lean on Him. He knows how long the planet has. So don't worry about, oh, we only have 12 years. Don't worry about that. Trust God and live life. It really comes down to that. So I hope this encouraged some people, those of you who are scared or who have been scared because of this whole climate change talk that is really pushed in the media by environmentalists. don't be scared. Don't be scared. Fear not. So I thank you guys so much for watching this week's video. And please comment below and let me know if you answered the question in the beginning that you were scared. Let me know if it changed your mind at all, if it made you not scared anymore. I'd love to know. So thank you guys so much again for tuning in this week. And until next week, stay safe out there. And as always, be blessed.